Thanks, folks. You can have a seat. Last week, for those of you that were with us, we talked about partnership. Here at Brook Church, we don't have membership in the traditional sense, but we challenge people to commit to be partners with us in what God is asking us to do. And some of you have asked about that. Some of you weren't here last week and have asked a little bit about it. And there are some of those partnership forums on the back tables back there, but I also have some here this morning up front. Is there anybody that would like one of these right now that didn't have one or didn't see them? I could pass some out, pass some around. Anybody want one or need one? Maybe we could just run those through these rows if we could. And there are also some extras on the back table there. If you're interested in that, there's certainly not enough in what I'm just passing out there for everybody. I know a lot of you had those last week, but there are some more on the back table. But we talked about making a commitment to what God is asking us to do here in this community. It's incredibly important that we commit ourselves. If we don't, we have a tendency to let those things that we have said that we would do slip. And so when we make that kind of commitment here, you're not making it to me, you're not making a commitment to Tim, you're making a commitment before God to serve and to give and to sacrifice for the sakes of those around us. So if you have those, you want to read through them. If you have more questions about them, feel free to ask me or Tim or others you know who are partners here at Moss Brook, and we'd love to talk with you about it a little bit more. If you do decide that you want to sign it, you can leave it on the back table or hand it to one of us, and we'll put it with the others. And continuing my thought process on commitment and what that means, I've been thinking about it a lot over the last month or so, and I realize how closely linked, or what a good metaphor for commitment to spiritual things, that it is to make a commitment to athletic prowess. I've been somebody who's been interested in sports my whole life, all kinds of sports. I love to watch anything and everything. I don't really watch too much anymore, but I used to and participated in all kinds of things, and it has always fascinated me, the training and what top-tier athletes put into what it is they're trying to do to compete at very high levels. Now, some of you know this already, but we have a couple of marathoners here at Moss Brook Church. Robert and Christy Wessels are training for the Chicago Marathon 2 weeks from today. So 2 weeks from right now, they will be cruising down the streets of Chicago to complete that marathon. And so I was asking them this week, I asked Christy, I knew that Christy was organized, but I said, Christy, do you know about how many hours, about how many miles? And she said, well, about 94 hours and about 497 miles. And I said, okay. Christy knows exactly how long she has been running and how much. And she said, Robert, probably slightly less than that, because there may have been a day or two when he has not hit the tarmac. But I promised her that I wouldn't blow Robert's secret, or I wouldn't tell anyone else about that at all. But that's commitment. I got to tell you, that's commitment. Over 6 months, 500 miles, 100 hours, and they're not done yet, 2 more weeks, just to run 26.2 miles. All of that work just to run that amount. I did a little research, and I was researching Olympic athletes. Now, we're not really thinking much about the Olympics right now, but Olympic athletes. And I found an article in Forbes magazine that talked about how top-tier Olympic athletes achieve their success. And I found a couple of quotes from 2 coaches. I just want you to listen to what he says here. He says, people don't even understand the process by which athletes undertake their individual sports to reach the Olympic level. This is Jim Ochowicz, who competed in the 1972 Olympics and coached the 2000 and 2004 Olympic men's cycling team here in the States. He said, you get there by simply sticking it out. There are a lot of people that try and give up. In fact, there are exceptions. While there are exceptions, coaches and trainers say it's common for athletes to invest 4 to 8 years in training in a sport to make an Olympic team. And when it comes to running, experts say that it might take that long just to develop the lung capacity needed to compete at a world-class level. 4 to 8 years just to get enough lung capacity to even begin to compete. Another USOC coach said this. I want you to listen to this part. This really got me. The biggest thing that people need to understand is that this takes consistency. The hardest part of training, listen to this, the hardest part of training is actually getting into the gym. Whether it's time, energy, motivation, whatever, listen to this last phrase. World-class athletes find a way to get there. Okay, so what this guy is saying, I'm reading between the lines a little, but I did read the whole article, so he did allude to this. What he is saying is that while there are certainly physiological things that some people possess that make them better athletes than others, in other words, some people are predisposed to be great athletes more so than other people because of their physical strength and makeup and all that stuff. But he is saying the most important part of making this kind of commitment is just getting there. It's finding a way to do what needs to be done to be who you want to be. I find that very, very interesting. I actually was thinking about that kind of commitment, and I was thinking about our conversation about it last week, and I was thinking about the dedication to self-denial that these world-class athletes have. And I realize, and I want to suggest to you this morning, that the key to commitment in any area of life is personal discipline. The key to commitment in any area of life is personal discipline. Whether you're talking about the physical aspects of life, the financial aspects of life, or the spiritual aspects of life, it is personal discipline. Last week we spent the whole time talking about commitment. Many of you signed that partnership covenant. I'm going to commit myself to the vision of Moss Brook Church to reach people around me. I commit myself to caring for others and being cared for in a small group. I commit myself to give everything I have, my time, my energy, my finances. And I commit myself to serving people around me. The only way that you're going to be able to keep that commitment is personal discipline. That's the only way. Last week I read you the story of William Borden. He talked about his commitment, and he said something. He had a phrase that he had written in his Bible that was recorded by his biographers, and I mentioned it to you last week, and since I read it about 3 weeks ago, I cannot get it out of my head. It's in my head constantly. And it's this phrase: say no to self and yes to Jesus every time. Say no to self and yes to Jesus every time. And I want to suggest to you this morning that personal discipline is as wonderfully simple and as excruciatingly difficult as that. It is incredibly simple and unbelievably difficult. It's saying yes, saying no to self, and saying yes to Jesus every time, in every area of our lives. And you might say, well, I can see how that matters, saying no to self and yes to Jesus when it comes to spiritual things. What does that have to do with physical discipline? What does that have to do with financial discipline? Well, I want you to think about this just a little bit this morning over the next few minutes. I want you to consider the fact that every decision you make in your life is a spiritual decision. Every decision that you make in your life is a spiritual decision. Now, you may or may not believe that, and at the end of this, you may or may not believe that, but I'm going to try and explain why I think that is the case. That everything we say and do, every choice that we make in the course of our lives is in fact a spiritual decision. And we need this kind of personal discipline in order to maintain our commitment. Think about it this way. Every decision that we make affects our ability to do what honors God on a consistent basis. Every decision I make affects my ability to accomplish what God has asked me to accomplish consistently. I want us to see what the Apostle Paul has to say about this, what indeed God has to say about it in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. If you have your Bible, you can turn there. I'm going to read a few verses. It's a tremendous passage. The whole chapter is very, very important, but we only have time to look at the last 4 verses of this chapter this morning. I want you to follow as I read them. I'm going to read them. We're just going to notice a few things from them this morning. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24, Paul, jumping into the conversation, says this: "Don't you realize that in a race, everyone runs, but only one person gets the prize? So run to win." Now, I don't know, everybody here is a little bit different. Your personality is a little bit different. Your motivations are a little bit different. But when I read this verse speaks to me. It speaks to me. Unless you think I'm talking about really, really spiritual things, it speaks to me on a primal, competitive, male level. Okay? If you're going to run this race, run to win. When I do stuff, I do it to win, sometimes to a fault. I want to win. If I am doing something, I want to win. My gorgeous wife could tell you some things about when I was a teenager and a young man where I allowed my competitiveness to get the better of me. I played on a lot of, well, I don't know how else to say it, folks. I played on a lot of poor basketball teams in my life, and we didn't win a lot of games. And man, oh man, I'm telling you what. I played on one team, one season. My first year of Bible college, we did not win one game. We played 22 games. We did not win one game. And if you think losing the 22nd game was any easier for me than losing the first game, you are very, very wrong. I hated it, and it made me mad because I am competitive. And so when I read this verse, I'm with Paul. I'm like, yeah, let's run to win. If we're going to do it, let's do our best. I didn't talk to Robert and Christy about motivation, but I'm guessing since they're going to be running against world-class marathoners, they probably are not thinking too much about winning the Chicago Marathon. But I guarantee you that they are doing everything that they can so that on that day, October 12th, 2014, they will do their best. And I have no doubt that they will both post personal bests because they're doing everything that they can to win. And I was thinking about that verse, and I thought, why don't we think about spiritual things that way? If we're going to do this, if we're going to be Christ followers, why don't we do it to win? Why don't we do our best? Why don't we not just phone it in? Why don't we give everything that we are? That's what Paul is saying. That's what he's challenging us here. He says, what he's saying to us is, let's just leave these easy commitments behind and give everything. Let's quit being Christ followers who just show up to church once in a while on Sunday and put a $5 in the offering plate and go away. Let's not do that. If we're going to run this race, then let's run it to win. What kind of Christ follower are you going to be? That's what he's asking us. We have a responsibility to each other, I believe. to challenge each other, to run to win. Look at verse 25. All athletes are disciplined in their training. They do it to win a prize that will fade away, but we do it for an eternal prize. I looked at that phrase, disciplined in their training. It literally means to contend for victory or to strain every muscle. To strain every muscle. Carries with the idea of continuous, repeated action. We're talking about consistency here. We're talking about discipline. We're talking about getting out of bed when we don't feel like getting out of bed. I don't mean this to be all about Robert and Christy, but I bet there are some mornings when they don't feel like getting out of bed and pounding the pavement at 5 o'clock in the morning. But you know, it's not enough. It's not enough for us to do it once. We look at some of the things that God has asked us to do and we say, well, there, I did it. Yeah, once. What about every day? What about every day when our feet hit the floor, straining every muscle to do what God has asked us to do? That's what he's talking. That's the picture he's painting here. I guarantee you, the next time the Olympics roll around and you're watching thousands of athletes from all over the world competing in all of these events, I guarantee you that there is not one of those athletes on that stage who got up one day and said, I think I'll do a little training so I can go to the Olympics. They did it every day after day, week after week, some of them year after year after year, just to get to that point. Now, what I think is interesting about this verse is that Paul says these athletes are disciplined in their training, and they do all this just to win a prize that will fade away. They do all this for what? Now, we see, I'm thinking Winter Olympics for some reason in my mind right at the moment. We see guys like, well, here from Maine, right? Seth Westcott, two-time gold medal winner in the Winter Games. We see guys like Bodie Miller, if you watch skiing at all. You hear about people like Lindsey Vonn or Shaun White snowboarding, winning all the gold medals and showing up on Wheaties boxes and being on all the commercials and all that stuff. And you think, wow, that's why, look at all the cash, look at all the glory. I found another little article that was talking about this. An interview with a bobsled driver named Jasmine Fenlater. How many people have heard of Jasmine Fenlater? Yeah, me neither. She went, this was before the last Winter Olympics, she spent some time at an indoor ice facility in Calgary, Alberta, because it wasn't cold enough to start practicing anywhere here in the States. And she said, going into this Olympic year, I told myself, I am going to make every sacrifice to support my ambitions. Listen to what she says. I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, and I'm going for broke. And at the end of the day, if I'm in debt up to my eyebrows for it, then I am. But for the glory of the journey, it's worth it for me to ride in a bobsled. She estimates it personally costs her $80,000 a year to compete, while USA Bobsled provides her with a two-man sled worth around $150,000. Fenlater says she is responsible for everything from buying the spikes that she wears at $300 a pair to new runners for the sled up to $10,000 per set. In Calgary, the ice time costs $250 an hour, and her whole trip to Calgary cost $5,000. As she was training in Switzerland, she faced some other tough choices. She said, do I really need to do laundry this week, or do I need a brand new pair of bobsled spikes? I'm going to go with the bobsled spikes, and I'll wash my clothes in the tub. Hey, who knows? Maybe I'll do my laundry in the tub for the whole rest of the season. That's commitment. That's personal discipline. For what? The chance to hurtle down that mountain in that steel tube. The chance at a medal, which, I looked it up, she did not win. All for something that fades away. How much more should we commit everything that we have for a lasting prize? For what God has offered us in eternity. I thought on just a much, much smaller level, think about the time and the energy and the money we put into putting our children in sports. I mean, it doesn't even compare to Olympics. But think about what we spend and the time and everything that goes into that to be committed to a sport. To be committed to what? Don't get me wrong, we must absolutely teach our children commitment. We need to make sure, along with all of those other good things, that we are teaching them commitment to God and the things that are eternal. You see, a disciplined Christ follower looks at life from an eternal perspective. Let me ask you this question. What are you pouring your time and your energy into right now that is resulting in an impact for eternity? What are you pouring all of your time, all of your energy, all of your money into right now that's making an impact for eternity? What is it? What are you doing? Look at verse 26. Paul says, "So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing." Paul got it. He knew what he was doing. I think it's interesting that he says it this way. Paul knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. He wasn't rolling out of bed in the morning and saying, well, I'll just see what happens today. I'll just see if I'm going to serve God today or if I'm going to do my own thing. I'll just see what takes place. We'll just kind of take it as it comes. No, Paul said, I run with purpose on every step. I know every time my sandal hits the dusty road why I'm doing it. He knew exactly what he was doing. There was a reason for the choices that he was making. You don't have to come to Moss Brook Church very long before you hear either Tim or I talking about intentionality. Intentionality. In other words, we decide what we are going to do and we do it. We make up our minds that this is the way that we're going to live our lives. This is the way we're going to raise our children. This is the way we're going to do our jobs. This is the way that we're going to spend our money. This is the way we're going to reach people around us. We decide this is what we're going to do. We do it on purpose. Intentionality. That's what Paul is talking about. A lot of you have done the Financial Peace University course. Some of you are doing it right now, the Dave Ramsey Personal Finance course, and he says something at least, I don't know, Robert, what, 6 or 8 times a session? I feel like I heard it 1,000 times, and it was good because it stuck with me. He says, live like no one else so that you can live like no one else. You know what discipline is, folks? I'm not just talking about your money. In any area of your life, discipline is looking around you. It's seeing how everybody else is living. It's seeing all the choices everybody else is making. It's seeing all the things that everyone says, you deserve to be able to do that, and saying, I'm not going to do that so that I get a different result at the other end. That's what discipline is. You see all the choices that people are making around you. You see all the choices your coworkers, your neighbors are making. All those other people. You see some of the results that they're reaping in their lives, personally, physically, financially, spiritually, relationally, emotionally. Do you know why? It's because of the choices they're making right now. And if you ever want your life to be different over here, you have to start making different choices right now. That's called discipline. We cannot leave our lives to chance. Look at verse 27. So, I discipline my body like an athlete training it to do what I should. Otherwise, I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Okay, I don't know exactly how old Paul was. I don't know exactly what kind of shape he was in. But this is a really interesting phrase, isn't it? I'm disciplining my body like an athlete. I'm training it. The word training it, or the phrase training it, means to bring it into service. And when I was reading that and kind of looking at these words a little bit and thinking them through in my mind, I thought about it this way. Paul said, I am going to make my body do what I want it to do. He's training it. It's a tool that he is using in service for God. About 4 months ago or so, Melody and I embarked on a little adventure ourselves. A new diet that we're doing together, a new way of eating. I hesitate to call it a diet because it's more like a lifestyle. And we're doing it, we are motivated by some of the health issues that Melody had been having and some real difficulties. And so she committed herself to it, and I said, well, I'll do it with you for moral support because you couldn't do it by yourself, I don't think. No reflection on her, but I don't know if anybody could do it by themselves. And we're doing it, and we thought if it relieves some of the symptoms that Melody is experiencing, then that would be great. It would be worth it. And I had always looked at myself because I had played sports my whole life and been fairly active, and I thought, well, I'm not in bad shape. I don't need to lose any weight. I'm doing good. I'm fine. And 4 months later, I've lost 20 pounds. I didn't think that was possible, but it is. And it all comes down to discipline, making choices. And as we have gone through this little journey over the last 3 or 4 months together, I realize I feel better. I sleep better. I have more energy. I have more strength. I have more endurance. And you know what, friends? I've realized that this is not just a physical thing. It's a spiritual thing. I'm bringing my body into what I want it to be so I can make it to do what I want it to do and accomplish what God is asking me to accomplish. That's just one example. It's one area of our lives. Look at what Paul says. Why did he discipline his body like an athlete? Why did he exercise personal discipline in every area of his life? Look what he says. I fear that after preaching to others, I myself might be disqualified. Do you know what Paul was afraid of? He was afraid of coming to the point in his life because of the choices that he was making. He was afraid of not being able to do what God was asking him to do. Paul had one fear that was driving him. There are other parts of the New Testament where Paul says, I'm not afraid what people can do to me. They can break my body if they want. It doesn't matter. I'm not scared of that stuff. But now, all of a sudden, Paul is scared of something. You know what he's scared of? Not being able to do what God has asked him to do. That's what he's scared of. I realize that it is entirely possible for me, and I presume since you are a human being, for you too. It is entirely possible due to the choices and the decisions that we make to make ourselves unusable by God. So the question is, can God do what he wants to do through you? In any area of your life, physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, can God do what he wants to do through you? You must decide how you're going to live your life. If you're a Christ follower, and you have a desire to serve God, then I would challenge you to say no to self and say yes to Jesus every time. Now listen, I want to make sure I give this disclaimer here. I say it a lot, and I probably still don't say it enough. I don't want anybody to think that I am perfect at this, because I am not. Oh, and by the way, you know that diet that Melody and I are doing? That lifestyle? Well, the guy says after 2 months of extreme strictness that you can ease off it, you can cheat once in a while. Hey, Myung, don't smile at me like that. I know what you're thinking. So the other day, busy, a lot going on. Melody eats her salad. I drive to Amato's. Get one of those beautiful brown boxes with the big tomato on the top. And Gavin and I eat that pizza. Now, Gavin can do it because he's 6'3" and weighs 100 pounds. And it doesn't matter what he puts in there. But the next morning when I get up, you know what I was thinking? Man, I should not have eaten that pizza. It was right there. You know what? If we're going to be the people that God has asked us to be, it requires personal discipline. And do you know what does not mesh well with personal discipline? Easing off. Cheating, if you will. We have to say no to self and yes to Jesus every time, because every decision that we make is a spiritual decision. Now, you may be sitting here and you may have been thinking about that and thought, I'm not sure if I'm down with that. I kind of get some of the stuff you're saying, but every decision is a spiritual decision. That's just crazy. Well, is it? Let me just throw out a few. This is dangerous. I'll probably slip out the back door after we're done, if that's okay with everyone else. I don't want to get lynched. But is that crazy that every decision is a spiritual decision? You tell me. How many times have you said, I just don't have time to read my Bible the way that I should? But you have time to watch TV. How many times have you said, I don't have any time, I don't have time to help so-and-so, or to take part in this, or to give a hand with this? But you're always able to squeeze in a little, I don't even know what this is, but me time. I just hear a lot of people talking about it all the time. I need some me time. I need to take care of myself. How many times have you said, I wish I could give, but I just can't. I just don't have the money to give. But you spend carelessly on other things. How many times have you said, I don't have the energy I need to do what I do. I don't have the endurance. I don't have the strength. But you overeat, or you eat improperly. How many times have you said, I'm too shy. That's just not who I am. It's not my personality to go up to someone and talk that you see that's at church who's never been there before, and they leave feeling unwelcome. I can't put any more truth in my mind. My mind is full. I just can't retain it. But we fill our minds with all kinds of filth and garbage from magazines and television shows and movies. Folks, I'm not going to get up on a soapbox and preach about this, but I got to tell you what, it breaks my heart when I see all the trash that is out there on TV, in the movie theater, And then I see people who I know are Christ followers say, man, I just watched this. That was great. I'm thinking, what are you putting in your mind? And you wonder why you can't grasp the truth of the Word of God and your mind is full of filth? Folks, every decision you make is a spiritual decision because it affects your ability to do what God is asking you to do. And everything that we do, by the way, every choice that we make, all of those decisions that we make, you make those decisions because it does something for you. It fills a need. It makes you feel good, or it makes you forget about other things that you should be thinking about. We have to discipline ourselves. We have to say no to ourselves. Yesterday morning, 25 people said no to self for a few hours, and as a result, a whole bunch of people are going to have heat this winter that could not otherwise afford to buy the wood that they need for their families. Listen, I'm not saying that you have to go out tomorrow, put your house on the market, liquidate your bank account, and move to Africa. That's not what I'm saying. Although I do believe that God, as my Lord, has the right to ask that of me if He desires it. But what I am saying is that every day you and I have to make decisions with one goal in mind. What is it that God is asking me to do? Can I leave you with that challenge this morning? To consider the spiritual implications of the decisions that you're making. I don't know what you're struggling with this morning. Some of you may be struggling with how you spend your money. Some of you may be struggling with your physical, the shape that you're in or the way that you eat. Some of you may be thinking about purely spiritual things this morning. Whatever it is, whatever area it is, let me challenge you to say no to yourself this week. And say yes to Jesus. Just each time, okay? Don't worry about next week yet. Worry about today. What did Paul say? I run with purpose in every step. I know exactly what I'm doing, know exactly why I'm doing it. That's what we need, folks. Discipline to keep our commitments. Father, thank you for the truth of your word. Thank you for the Apostle Paul and his example, his words to us, inspired by your Holy Spirit. I pray that we would each consider the decisions that we make, even this afternoon, with our time, with our money, with our bodies, with our minds, all of these resources you have given us. May we use them to serve you and others. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Thanks, folks. I hope you have a great week.